Hello everyone! Welcome to my channel. Subscribe to the channel to watch the latest videos. A Brazil-Russia nuclear declaration, but in reality, this could signal a major geopolitical shift right here in the Western Hemisphere, because this isn't just about reactors and radioisotopes. This is about sovereignty. First and foremost, this is about sovereignty in terms of energy security and strategic autonomy. And it has everything to do with Washington having the final word in Latin America. So, Brazil and Russia have just signed a declaration reaffirming their commitment to the peaceful use of nuclear energy. The agreement came out of high-level talks in Brazil and covers everything from electricity generation and the nuclear fuel cycle to regulatory cooperation and even modernization of the legal framework that governs their nuclear collaboration. But here's what's really important. This wasn't framed as a narrow technical arrangement. It was embedded in a much broader defense of multilateralism and a clear critique of what both sides called, and I quote here, unilateral coercive measures. And let's be honest, everybody knows what that is a code for. It is a code for the United States of America and its foreign policy. So the visit that sealed this renewed partnership was led by Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin. In Brazil, Mishustin met with Brazilian President Lula da Silva and the Vice President of Brazil, Geraldo Alckmin. And what came out of this was a very important development for the Western Hemisphere. It should not be underestimated. Russia has expressed willingness and readiness to share nuclear technologies with Brazil across multiple domains. It has to do with electricity generation, fuel fabrication, small modular reactors, even floating nuclear plants. There's also cooperation on medical applications like radioisotopes for cancer treatments, and this is an area where both countries already have very advanced expertise. Brazil and Russia have enjoyed quite close and stable relations. The new agreement that I just described builds on a cooperation agreement that was signed several years ago, back in 2017. But now, what's interesting and what I would like to emphasize in today's video, now the scope of that agreement is expanding. Small modular reactors are part of the conversation. Fuel cycle services are also part of the conversation, and even advanced nuclear infrastructure. So, a good question to ask would be, well, why now? The first agreement was signed back in 2017. We're in 2026. Why now? Well, timing is everything, truly. Brazil is expected to decide soon whether to complete the long-delayed Angra 3 nuclear power plant. Angra 3 has become a symbol of Brazil's industrial ambition, of course, yes, but also of its political dysfunction in a way, of its bureaucratic gridlock, which is present in every single state. Let's be honest, but Russian technical expertise and financing models could actually tip the balance toward completion. And if that happens, this becomes a geopolitical signal that, despite Washington's neo-imperialist claims of owning the entire Western Hemisphere as it continues to dismiss national interests of its neighbors, Brazil says, yeah, sure, we know what Washington is trying to do, but actually, we would like to carve our own path. And that is precisely what Lula da Silva is doing here. All of this is unfolding against the backdrop of a much more assertive U.S. posture in Latin America. Under President Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Washington's approach has taken on what many describe as a neo-Monroe Doctrine tone. The original Monroe Doctrine was against European involvement in the Western Hemisphere, but what we have now is actually a Donroe Doctrine, as many refer to it. Now, what's important to clarify here is that Brazil isn't putting all of its eggs in one basket, and that's what I find quite remarkable about Brazil's approach toward the BRICS bloc as well as its Western neighbors. Brazil is also deepening peaceful nuclear dialogue with China, particularly on uranium supply chains and also on small reactors. That engagement with BRICS partners as well as with Western partners strengthens Brazil's leverage, and it reduces vulnerability to any single external power, any single external actor. And needless to say, this is in Brazil's best interest to do. And that's where the multipolar dimension comes in. This isn't just Brazil buying reactors, of course. This is Brazil positioning itself within an alternative network of strategic cooperation, one that does include Russia, does include China, and of course the broader BRICS framework, in addition to Western partners. So, trade between Brazil and Russia has actually doubled over the past 5 years to roughly $10 billion a year. Russia supplies about 30% of Brazil's fertilizer needs, which is essential to its agricultural needs and to its food security. Agricultural cooperation is expanding into plant breeding, into livestock genetics, and even soil science. So, there are discussions about new shipping routes between St. Petersburg and Brazilian ports. Direct air links may resume as well. There are discussions to that end as well. In pharmaceuticals, Russia is ready to localize production in Brazil, including innovative treatments of cancer, autoimmune diseases, and diabetes. There is a joint oncology working group that is being established as well between Russia and Brazil. They are also talking about telemedicine and digital healthcare cooperation that is also on the agenda. So even though we don't really hear about these things very often, clearly there is a lot that's taking place behind closed doors, and I think it is very important to discuss it in the broader context of multipolarity and the new world order, if you will. So when Mishustin called Brazil a strategic partner, those are his words, this wasn't just some diplomatic rhetoric. It actually reflects a comprehensive alignment across a range of areas, even including discussions within BRICS members about modern payment instruments that bypass traditional Western-dominated systems. Now, from Washington's perspective, this is of course very uncomfortable because the Western Hemisphere has long been treated as a strategic backyard. Washington keeps saying, well, this is our backyard. These sovereign nations are our backyard. In reality, things are a bit different. A Russia-Brazil nuclear partnership, however peaceful, does challenge that assumption. So multilateral partnerships offer leverage to Brazil, which is something that Washington would rather Brazil not have. If Brazil succeeds in expanding nuclear cooperation with Russia and China, while also being able to maintain trade relations with the United States and Europe, it could actually redefine what sovereignty and what strategic autonomy looks like for Latin America. This could be a first, and clearly it has nothing to do with Brazil acting against the United States. Brazil acts in its own interest, and it appears to want to balance its own interests with the realities of Trump's foreign policy agenda. And that is no small task. That is a big challenge for any state. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here for this video. If you haven't already, please consider supporting my work. I appreciate every single one of you who has become a paid subscriber. I look forward to seeing you here tomorrow, and I do hope that you have a great rest of your day. Take care.